author, columnist, managing editor of LibertyNation.com, podcast host and conservative policy advocate.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Welcome to Liberty Nation Radio here on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. On today's special edition, we talk how it is in the heartland, the Trump v. Biden economy, and dodging SCOTUS. It's going to be quite the show. Don't go anywhere. Are politicians ignoring the heartland? And if they are they doing so at their peril? We're very fortunate today to be joined by Liberty Nation's national correspondent and host and producer of the excellent Conservative 5 videocast, Miss Sarah Cowgill, who has been writing the longest running and most successful column on the pages of LibertyNation.com, which is her Heartlanders column. Sarah, thanks for joining us.
Hey, it's my pleasure to be here, Mark.
So, Sarah, this column that you've been writing, I know it's one of my favorites because it gives a glimpse into really what's happening in the heartlands. And you speak to people, you get their comments on the biting issues of the day. So it's not just waxing lyrical about, this is what it means to be a Heartlander, but it's finding out the current on the pulse zeitgeist positions of those people. Now, I really want to get into why politicians are ignoring the heartlands, if they are, in fact, and what that means politically. But first, I'd like to kind of get into your mind a bit about what gave you the idea to...
Careful, you might not get out.
You can get in, but you can never get out. Michael Corleone in Godfather 3, the lesser Godfather tome. So what made you want to write this article, and this column, and why do you think it's had such success over so many years?
It stemmed from back in 2016. I drove from where I live in Indiana back to my brother's house in New Mexico. And throughout that whole trip, there was just a lot of political talk. And I like to stop and go the back ways and end up at the little diners with pancake houses or the little pub here and there. And I just got to talking to people. And so I started writing it down, everything they would say and state, where they were from, how they identified ideologically. And when, the election rolled around and I was saying, hey, there's Trump signs everywhere, and people were like going, no, you're just wrong, and that's not going to change the election. Well, those signs were all over the Midwest and the Southwest, and it did change the election. And we are a powerful voice in the heartland, in what people like to refer to as flyover states, because you just fly over them when you're going to,
or
say,
from
Napa
the
Valley.
back 40, which is the name of your column.
Yeah. And we, a lot of us around here have the back 40 in the back 40.
In the back 40.
So when Liberty Nation came about, and we got to talking about doing, hey, let's do a series. Let's do a, running across the country series and just go from the heartland. And that evolved into the column. And so I just started interviewing people, talking to people, asking if they would go on record. All sorts of people, I got hippies and stoners and bankers and anybody that really can resonate with where most of America lives, which is between California and New York.
Yeah.
So that's how it started. And, I've got enough friends in enough different places that, I can find people to interview. I can get them to help me find people to interview. So that's kind of how it all went.
That's something that I've always thought about with the column, is that you always find the people ready to go on record. And that makes me wonder how much these Heartlanders feel as though they don't have a voice anywhere else, because, you've got to read that. Folks at home listening, you have to go and read the From the Back 40 column. There's some spicy folks out there, and they're willing they're willing to go on record with their spicy opinions, which is wonderful. Yeah. That's what free speech is all about, right? Free thinking, free speech, LibertyNation.com. But the reason that I think that they're so willing to and so eager to, because you've produced this column every single week for many, many years now, is
Yes.
that they don't feel they have a voice or an outlet in other places. What do you make of that?
They don't. You don't see CNN. I mean, you'll see CNN show up in Iowa or other states for caucuses or presidential visits or primary events or, those kinds of things. But you don't see CNN or Fox and all of the major, East and West Coast media elites. They don't care because they don't think it's important. They don't think that people that live in the middle of the country are smart enough to vote. Why do we want to visit them? But you'd really be surprised that the old guy missing a finger wearing overalls and having a Jack and Coke can out talk a lot of people on military issues because they are informed and they do stay up on what's going on. And they're mad. They're really mad right now, but they were mad in 2015 and 16, and then they got happy and now they're mad again. So you do have a lot of smart people around here. A good friend of mine, Steve McIntosh, he ran a multiple $1 million farming enterprise. You can't be stupid. You cannot be stupid. And
I remember
got a lot of.
I remember in one of your columns talking about this was maybe a couple of years ago. They do stick in the mind, listeners. These columns do stick in the mind about how the supercomputers that are on the new tractors that you have to be an expert in understanding technology to run a farm nowadays.
You do. Kamala Harris once said, "Do they even have a Kinko's or a place to get a copier?" And it was like, you moron, I dare you to crawl into a combine and try to figure that out. These are, $500,000 equipment. And you're not stupid. You cannot be stupid. You got to know what you're doing.
So, yeah, I think you're right about how your main media outlets, they do tend to ignore, they ignore basically everywhere in the middle. And you see that the rare occasions where they do, and for example, I believe it's Lawrence Jones on Fox News Morning. He's great. I admire him a lot. I think he's a very personable, very smart guy. But really, he goes to these diners in the morning and they appear at the diner and say, "Hi, what's your name? Who are you voting for?" And then they move on. That's not getting somebody's opinion on something. That's basically just building the story that they want to build. Whereas in your column from the Back 40, you're letting people speak their minds, and that's such a rarity nowadays. Now let's talk about these. Well, in fact, later on in the show, we will talk about the political temperament of these Heartlanders. But just before we finish up this first segment, do you think that ignoring the Heartlands for 3.5 years at a time until a presidential election rolls around, or let's say almost every 2 years they ignore them for 18 to 20 months because there's always midterms going on, do you think it's a dangerous strategy politically?
Well, of course. First of all, nobody likes to be ignored. I don't care if you're a city elite or a farmer or a rancher in the middle of nowhere. I mean, they might want to be left alone, but they don't want their opinions.
There's a big difference there. A big difference.
Yeah, they don't want their representatives, which should be representative of them, out doing what they do to irritate everybody. So I just think it's one of those things that it's a dangerous precedent. This is a powerful group of people in the middle, and I think they should be allowed, to be heard. And so that's what I do.
And everybody should check that out on the page of LibertyNation.com, From the Back 40 by Sarah Cowgill. Sarah, thanks very much. Hang around. We'll be back with you after this short break. Listeners, don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And we're back with Sarah Cowgill, national correspondent at LibertyNation.com and author of the Back 40 column, the longest running and most successful column on the page of LibertyNation.com. Sarah, thanks for coming back with us. Now, earlier in the show, we were talking about the ignored voices between the coasts. But now I really want to talk about the temperament that's what's the burning overriding temperament, the feeling in the heartland based on these hundreds of interviews that you've been doing?
Angry. I mean, I can't find a Democrat that's happy or a Republican that's happy. Everybody's angry. It took a while, granted, because a lot of people around here, at least where I live, it's very rural and people take care of their own. So somebody down the street has a crop of sweet corn, they spread the love. We have our own, livestock. We do our own thing. The guy across the street has eggs, I get fresh eggs. So, it really took a while for inflation to arrive here as bad as it is right now.
Yeah.
And it's people are angry. I mean, even people with a serious amount of wealth, they have stopped spending it and going out, and they're just hunkered down. And you've got the people that don't have wealth, the intermediate, middle class folks, they're just holding on. People who didn't have debt now have debt. They didn't have credit card debts. They now have credit cards and credit card debt. And it's not going well. And it's angry. Everybody's angry. Everybody's mad. They're mad about guns. They're mad about the economy. They're mad about being in skirmishes in Ukraine or the Gaza Strip. They don't have anything like, let's worry about here. Let's worry about the southern border. Let's worry about the northern border. We're not dealing with our own country. It's like every time there's some big issue to come up, there's a diversion. And Heartlanders aren't stupid. They see it. They're like, yep, there's another diversion. Nothing to see here.
That really makes me think about things in terms of the division in the country. So it's from the back 40. We're talking about the flyover states. And each of these things that you mentioned, there's inflation. The inflation is caused by myriad factors. We don't want to get into our Andrew Moran economics thing just here, although we will be hearing from him later in the show. But these are things that are not driven by somebody with, a couple of acres out the back of their home that scratch a living doing this, that, the other. It's not driven by them. The overseas wars, for which vast amounts of the tax take, the US tax take, is being flittered away on, and some of it never to return, I might add. These are all issues that occur or are exacerbated by the east and the west coasts, and yet it seems that the real pressure pushes towards the middle.
Well, it seems, because we pay most of the taxes. It does seem that city people look down on anybody that doesn't live in an urban environment. Like the rest of us are not educated. Like the rest of us are not caring or careful or concerned for our fellow humans. They mock religion. That the evangelicals are just hypocrites. They really are kind of mean, and we're a very big part of the target for them. And it's painted a picture. Barack Obama said, grab your guns, grab your Bibles. Well, yeah, we got both of those, and we will. And there's nothing wrong with that. And so it's really, they've gotten to the point where they just paint a really ugly picture of here. Yet people from blue states are moving to red states, and that includes the state I live in.
Yeah,
so something's going on.
It seems to me that when Barack Obama described the rural folks, they're out there clinging to their guns and their Bibles, it's the idea of permission concept, right? It's like, if somebody in authority says something, then it's okay for everybody else to say something. It unleashed this vitriol from the coasts to Middle America. It's like there's nothing wrong with Middle America, but they mock it. Was it Stephen Colbert, like Chef Boyardee or something he was making jokes about in his monologues? And so there's this vitriol against the country, the part of the country that produces everything that they're eating, by the way. They're going hungry.
Well, except for lettuce in California. But
Which, they've barely got enough water to
yeah,
feed the lettuce.
yeah, there's those, and somebody should read Water Wars that John Clark did. It's amazing.
Yes,
The Western Water Wars.
Yeah, John Clark, author on libertynation.com. He's an author, a pastor, a farmer as well. Check out his writings. It's about the Saudi water wars and how they're impacting America. It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy. But check that out if you want to talk about Water Wars. Rain falls from the sky here. we usually don't have droughts, but sometimes we'll have a flood. So it's just there are good people here. They're good, smart, intelligent, big-hearted. We'll help your neighbor. We'll push you out of a snowdrift when you're stupid and drive into one. Nobody's going to tell you no, and you're not going to find
sorry to interrupt. Sorry, there's a point I wanted to get down. I made a note of it. You mentioned about how people are moving from these coastal places to thing, and now that's very true. And we saw that we saw Gavin Newsom and Ron DeSantis, governors of California and Florida, respectively, arguing this out, and Gavin Newsom picking random numbers out of the sky just to try and prove his point. It was really quite. He'd make a good fiction author, I think is the nice way to put it. But here's the thing, right? People are moving into the Midwest, but the question I want to ask is: are they bringing their politics? Well, sorry, not just the Midwest, but Middle America. But are they bringing their politics with them? Because it seems to me that what they're fleeing, what they're leaving behind, is the result of these very specific politics, these very specific blue state politics. And then they're moving to the middle of the country or Texas or Florida or Colorado. And now are they bringing those blue state politics with them? And does that mean that these places will be more akin to the coasts in the future with demographic change?
You mentioned earlier the diluting of the electorate from conservative to more moderate or to more independent. I've seen some more people go independent from both sides of the aisle. Mark, you talked about the diluting of the electorate, and that is happening, but I don't know if it's happening to take away from ideology. I think it's because of the particular people in charge of the Republican Party and of the Democratic Party, and people are kind of sour on what's happened. So you've got a country in distress. You've got a former president that they're just trying real hard to get rid of, who's causing all sorts of heartburn for the Democrats. And people are just tired of it. And I think that what you're seeing here is people are moving from red states or from blue states into red states simply because they can't afford to live in them.
People are happy where they are in the middle. Why? Because I think America, politically,
quality of life
and population, it's all in the middle, and it's all about quality of life. Sarah Cowgill, thank you ever so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Heading into the 2024 election, the two main contenders, current President Joe Biden and former President Donald J. Trump, will likely be touting their records, both on governing their parties, respective parties, and also, most importantly, the economy. So who wins in that battle of the titans? Well, fortunately, we have with us Mr. Andrew Moran back again to call this fight as the referee. Andrew, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, Andrew, I think it depends on which side of the ideological divide one sits to determine what your opinion is on who has or had the better economy, Donald Trump or Joe Biden. Because it seems to me that cheerleaders for Joe Biden are touting his economic success, whereas people who aren't supporting Joe Biden in the upcoming election, they seem to be saying that, well, actually, all this economic news is pretty much nonsense. And that's the same situation, but reversed for those who support President Trump, former President Donald Trump. So could you cast a bit of light on this call the blows and strikes for us?
Well, I would say first that if you look at many of the polling data, I mean, most of the country is against Bidenomics. They think the country's on the wrong track. But within that polling data, you see a lot of Democrats also say that the economy is on the wrong track, that they don't think Bidenomics is great. Now, if you want to assess the Trump economy and the Biden economy, or Trumponomics versus Bidenomics, the best thing to do is just look at the data. You look at the main data that everyone loves looking at, which is GDP, unemployment rate, job creation, and let's say gas prices. Now, recently, the Bureau of Economic Analysis published an in-depth comprehensive report that highlights all the data, or update all the data from 2018 to 2000, I think 2022 or early 2023. Anyway, their conclusion was that the Trump economy was better than reported. The Biden economy to date has been worse than what's been reported. The GDP was higher under Trump. Was higher than what the Bureau of Economic Analysis reported. Unemployment was better. Job creation was better. And then if you look at the American Automobile Association's numbers, gasoline prices were lower. And opposite with Biden. Job creation has been lower than expected. GDP has been lower than expected. Unemployment has been higher than expected. And of course, gasoline prices have been higher.
So it seems to me that the pure numbers suggest that it's Trumponomics over Bidenomics. But there's been a lot of spin, and this is true on both sides of the political aisle. You know, when there's a Republican in office, the more right-leaning sites that they tout everything as wonderful and ignore the bad. And that same has come true for now there's a Democrat in office. Perhaps it's in a little more in overdrive now, because there's a certain desperation behind not wanting to have Trump back in office. And I think perhaps the media has brought into the idea, and I think it's a fair assessment that it's the economy stupid when it comes to casting your vote. But there's been a lot of spin on the Joe Biden numbers. And we have talked about some of these things in recent episodes of Liberty Nation Radio. But I would like to delve into a few more specific points, if I may. So we hear that Joe Biden is the greatest jobs creating president. Now, my understanding of this is that what they're doing is all of these jobs that were either temporarily, well, in fact, there's two factors, isn't there, to this? If I could just put out what I think they are, and then you could go into that and maybe correct me if I'm wrong. Number one is they're counting the jobs that almost sort of vanished during the COVID lockdown. So they weren't available to be worked, and then they came back once the COVID lockdowns lifted. And they're counting those as this is because of Joe Biden's policies, which I don't think is a fair one. And the other aspect is that you have they're recording new job data, but they're recording this for people with multiple jobs. So instead of if some poor schmo has to work 4 jobs to make ends meet, they're saying, hey, that's 4 new jobs in the marketplace. This is great for the economy. Even though that one person is barely making ends meet on 4 jobs. Tell me how wrong I am.
I wish I had a notepad so I could jot that all. So first of all, I'd like to say that Liberty Nation, we've been reporting down the middle on both the Trump economy and the Biden economy. We I remember reporting on Trump economy, and I used to write religiously about how terrible he was on fiscal policy and the deficit. Yeah. Now, when it comes to jobs, so the best way to measure job creation between the Trump economy and the Biden economy is you exclude the pandemic. So as the BA even noted, the Trump economy had better job creation before the pandemic than Biden has in the post-pandemic economy. Biden does not do that. Biden and his team count specifically from when he entered office to now, and he does that. That's how he gets that 15 million job creation mark. But if you exclude what I do when I report on the Biden economy is I start from when officially all the jobs were returned to the U.S. economy. Now, there's been some debate on what that date was. I use August 2022. And if you go from that period onward, then you see that Biden has overseen about between 4 and 6 million new jobs, and not this 15 million. And you don't see also Trump losing 6 million jobs if you exclude the pandemic. So it's all about the beauty of macroeconomic data is that you can you have a certain narrative in mind, and then you try to sift through all the data and try to pinpoint to something, saying, see, oh, right there, that see, my Bidenomics is absolutely stunning because this particular data point is fantastic. But at the same time, you can also, you know, prove something that something is rotten in Denmark. So in the last jobs report, the establishment survey showed that there were 153,000 new jobs. But if you look at the household survey, which you just referenced by talking about how, you know, double counting or triple counting job creation, the household survey showed that the economy actually lost 340,000 jobs. I think that was something that the media missed reporting on in that BLS report, or the Bureau of Labor Statistics report.
That's a huge
Sorry,
discrepancy.
Lisa, I mentioned acronyms. Sorry.
That's okay. That's a huge discrepancy, though, isn't it? 153 versus 300,000 lost.
Yes.
So does that mean that you'll have to explain this like I'm a slightly slow 4-year-old. Does that mean that there are more or less jobs overall in the total economy this month than last month?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. So there is the net loss in jobs. If you look at the other part of the data of the Bureau of Labor Statistics report, it showed that the number of people working 2 or more jobs reached a record high in October. So, you know, and also at the same time, this coincided with the recent JOLTS report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that showed that the number of job openings decreased again about I think it was about 300,000 jobs to around 8.7 million job openings. So all these numbers coincide and connect when it comes to, you know, the 340,000 lost jobs, decline in job openings, and the number of people working 2 or more jobs hitting all-time highs.
If I could just come back on a couple of those points, you say
Yes.
Number of people working, 2 jobs, record high. That's a bad economic indicator, isn't it?
It is, because it shows that inflation's too high. The cost of living is really eroding people's incomes. They have too much debt, and they need to go back to the workforce and, you know, try to work multiple jobs to keep their heads above water. You know, one thing that the Biden administration keeps touting is that, you know, more people are working labor force than in previous years. But at the same time, he's ignoring one thing, that people who retired are going back into the workforce because, you know, their retirement savings are depleted. You know, their investment income has been eroded. So there are many factors of why people are going back into the economy. And of course, you know, because the labor market is so tight, and, you know, there's higher wages that, you know, I would say nominal wages, not real wage growth, of course, but nominal wages are higher. That's not a factor why people are going back into the labor market.
And finally, you mentioned the word, if you could very briefly just respond to this, you mentioned the word again a lot, as in there's a downward thing again. So does this mean that we're actually on a trend towards quite a poor economy when it comes to 2024 election?
I would say yes, because you're starting to see a lot of the data showing this. With monetary policy, it operates with a lag. So with monetary policy, it takes about a year for the effects of higher interest rates to seep into the economy. You're starting to see a lot of the data showing that. So is like factory orders, durable job goods, you know, the slower labor market. You're starting to see this. So perhaps 2024, that's when, you know, a lot of the economist recession predictions will come to fruition.
Andrew Moran, thanks ever so much for bringing us some lively information there. I do appreciate you.
Well, thank you for having me.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
What if a court made an order and nobody followed it? Are we in the Twilight Zone or the United States of America? Well, we're very fortunate to have with us somebody who can hopefully answer this question for us, Mr. Scott DeCosenza, Liberty Nation's legal affairs editor and host of the Most Excellent Uprising podcast. Thanks for being here, Scott.
Cheers, Mark. Always a pleasure.
So, Scott, it seems to me that I keep hearing or reading all of these stories about how this municipality is in the process of trying to implement a new gun restriction law that seems to me and to others to be against the Bruen decision, so recently released by the Supreme Court. And by the same token, I hear that colleges, campuses, and universities around the country are looking for ways to increase their non-white student numbers. And yet that seems to be going against the July decision that essentially put the final nail in the coffin of affirmative action. Scott, are people just not that into the Supreme Court?
Well, Mark, intransigence in the face of orders demanding that they respect the civil rights of Americans is something that many Democrat entrenched power centers have had problems with historically in this country. This goes back to the time of the breaking up of segregation and Jim Crow, when Southern Democrats decided not to obey the orders of the Supreme Court, requiring them to stop discriminating against people on the basis of their race. And so famously, we've had, whether it's Eisenhower or Kennedy sending in troops to kind of enforce these rules. And it goes straight through to today, where these almost, this is a thing that you just generally see in non-competitive Democrat dominated political structures. So where there's competition and they have to worry about somebody holding their feet to the fire, or there are others in power, it's not as bad. But where it is all just deep blue, they seem to think they can do what they want. And I think that it's a rational reaction for the politicians. As we think about this, Mark, just from an economics perspective, if those politicians, all they want is power and votes, and the people don't punish them for refusing to follow a Supreme Court decision, but it maybe in fact reward them with more power and votes, well, then their interests are actually aligned against the court and implementing those decisions.
Yes, you make some really good points there, and it kind of makes me think also about another big decision that was made recently by the Supreme Court, and that's the essentially the scuppering of Roe v. Wade and handing back the decisions on abortion to the states. Now, that doesn't apply in the same arena as the Bruen decision, which was about the right to bear firearms, because that's a constitutionally protected right. Is that correct?
Mark, in the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court said that abortion was not a constitutionally guaranteed right under most circumstances. And so that's why it sort of devolved the mechanisms of determining when it's okay to the states. But for instance, the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruen case, they found the exact opposite, which was that there was a fundamental right to keep and bear arms that the states were often imposing on. And so that's the difference.
So any efforts to go against the Bruen decision, which I believe in brief, it encapsulates that there has to be a reason. No, there doesn't have to be a reason.
Mark, let me do
owning
it,
a firearm. Please save me on this.
The essential takeaway holding was that for a regulation to be constitutional today, it would essentially have had to have been constitutional or seen as such at the time that the Second Amendment was ratified. And so that basically just knocks down this entire body of available gun controls for people who wish to tighten down gun controls. Let me just say this to you, though. The people who are doing the legislating around or through the Supreme Court decisions, depending on your perspective, they don't say we're ignoring the case. For the record, what they say is we're narrowly tailoring these laws to comply with that case. Now, that may sound preposterous to you and I when we actually read the text of the case and then read the text of the proposed legislation. But that is, in fact, what they're saying. They're not claiming the right to ignore it. They're claiming that they're acting within the scope of it.
Which is why we're getting a lot more challenges heading towards the courts, the upper levels of the courts on gun control cases. Now, the same thing appears to be applying for the Students for Fair Admission versus Cleveland and Same Group versus Harvard, which was the July...
North Carolina,
sorry.
Yes.
Which Cleveland.
I know that you're not from here, but those are totally separate places.
I'm aware. Laverne and Shirley are from one of those.
Milwaukee, I think.
Milwaukee. Okay. Yeah. So Alice Cooper, also Milwaukee. All right. So that July decision that essentially stopped universities from discriminating based on race, which a lot of people think is a good thing. But it seems that these same universities are now trying other workarounds, even ones that have been specifically pointed out by the court to not be a workaround, to increase their black student body whilst diminishing their white and Asian student bodies, but they still seem to be going at it.
Yes, their behavior really evokes these unrepentant Southern racists who did everything they could after slavery and then after Jim Crow in order to denigrate people based on their race. And that is the function now of so many of these college administrators and admissions officers. They are, to say that they have to be, go kicking and screaming down the path of race neutrality is, I think, an understatement. It's baked into their DNA. And what's going to happen, I think, is just a number of cases in perpetuity where the courts continue to draw that pool smaller and smaller to the point where I could actually see a future mark in some distant time when the courts grow so exasperated that they don't even allow mention of race in any way. Like, you can't say I was like the president of the African American club. You have to say I was president of an extracurricular activity, like just omitting all of it so that they can.
Well, that is one of the things that I believe was explicitly forbidden by the ruling. Is because the universities, they're asking for essays, but the people who advise potential students on essays, they're saying, yes, make it about your struggle and about your identity. So essentially they're saying, hey, look, I'm black, or I'm this protected characteristic, or right. this oppressed group, therefore look at me, at me, and thereby gain that advantage in admissions.
So if you the gaming of these admissions is an interest of mine, and I think that what you'll have is, and by the way, this is not generally the case for the local kind of state university that has some competition. This is for the elite university slots.
I know where you're going with this. I know exactly where you're going with this.
What's going to happen is you're going to have a Caucasian student who has no African ancestry or quote unquote minority ancestry, and they will be able to craft an essay that truthfully discusses their experience in life and gives a wanting reader the impression that they are in fact an African American or a descendant of American slavery, but that they're not, and they'll be able to leverage. And guess who that's going to benefit? Well, so I think that you're right. For one cycle or so, maybe we'll see blacks or the administrators use the essay system to generate, acceptance based on race. But then I think quickly thereafter, it'll be co-opted. And so it'll be nibbled away at slowly but surely. I think, we're not there. We won't have 100% compliance right away, but I think at some point we will get close to it.
Well, I mean, that may even end up being the case with the Bruen decision, but it doesn't seem as likely.
Just a kick in the teeth before we leave that topic, I want to say that's, of course, if anybody sees the utility in attending college and university at all going forward. The prevalence of online classes and free education is just booming. So
it absolutely is. And I believe Jordan Peterson is in the process of setting up the Peterson Academy that intends to deliver a fully accredited, this is not a sponsorship post, by the way, it's just something I read about recently, a fully accredited degree for around $4,000.
I just saw a headline from a non-ideological source yesterday that indicated 2 big companies were dropping their undergraduate degree requirements in the United States. I think it's the idea that the colleges impart something other than obedience to the mainstream is
the Prussian model of education is a topic for another time. Scott D. Cosenza, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark.
And that's all we have time for on this week's edition of Liberty Nation Radio here on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. I'd like to thank our guests, Sarah Cowgill, Andrew Moran, and Scott D. Cosenza, and of course you, the listeners, for taking the time to tune in and join us there at home. We at Liberty Nation Radio wish you the very, very best for the new year and hope that you're keeping free thinking and free speech at the top of everything that you do. Thanks for being here. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Don't get caught up in the media madness. Join our movement for free thinking and free speech at libertynation.com. Publishing news and analysis 24/7 with original articles by our team of authors who tell it like it is. Join us each week for online TV shows, The Uprising Podcast, and Liberty Nation Radio. We believe in free thinking and free speech. We are LibertyNation.com.